WesWes Show.
Right, kia ora, tolofalava, and welcome to the Counter Ruck, a podcast where we discuss all things rugby. I'm the host of the Counter Ruck, Stace, so thanks for joining us for another episode. We're joined today by a lot of our regular panels, so I'll start by introducing everyone. We've got from the City of the Future, and I'll say senior WesWes columnist now, Joey Nanai. Joey, mate, thanks for jumping on us.
Thank you for having me. As always, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, definitely columnist. He's probably wrote the most articles for our website, so I'm going to introduce you as columnist from now on.
Thank you.
But we also have Waitemata Rugby stalwart, and I'll say, with the World Cup looming, French rugby supporter, Rog. Rog, thanks for jumping on, my brother.
And silently, Fozzie Bear.
Oh, yes, of course. Can't leave that out. Definitely Fozzie's number one supporter. Probably the only one in the country. So, good. I'll put that out there.
To be fair as well to the other rugby unions that Rogers played for, there's a few other clubs that would call him a stalwart of their club too.
That's true. We could do a whole podcast on all your clubs there.
More clubs than Tiger Woods.
Wow. There's a guy at Waitemata that has probably got more clubs than Tiger Woods, and it definitely isn't me. I thought I had played for a number of... Joey, I think you've played for more clubs than me, mate.
Joey, you should not be throwing stones.
I've traversed 3 unions, the whole Blues franchise, Counties Monaco, which was once part of the Blues franchise, North Harbour and Auckland. But, one each in those unions, and two clubs in Auckland unions. So
somehow I missed North Harbour and went straight to Northland.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Grass was green on that side.
Nice. Yeah, it's good to hear you guys played with all those clubs. But I'll just take care of some housekeeping, boys, before we get into it. So, firstly, check out our website, www.weswesnet.com, and don't forget to click the Support Us button on the page to keep the content flowing. And we also have some exclusive content available for our supporters, so definitely some additional benefits there. I'll also mention you can follow the Counter Ruck on Twitter and Facebook, although we haven't been as active as we should be. So give us a follow and give us a like on there. Okay, boys, it's been a while since our last show. We finished up in March this year. That was our last one. So just wanted to do a quick catch up about what everyone's been up to. So Joy, mate, what have you been up to in the 4 months since our last show?
Oh, mate, I've been playing rugby.
Nice.
I've been playing rugby and talking a whole lot of shit about rugby across the board and backing rugby nations that I have no business backing. For the upcoming World Cup this year. So, I've been playing rugby with a rugby club that I have no business playing for, but I'm happy to play for them because my old boys team are there at under the Papatoetoe Rugby Football Club banners. And there's a couple of legends there as well.
Nice.
So how many clubs does that take you to now, Joey?
Hey, we'll do a podcast every week. You wear a different jersey every
you've played in the Waikato Union as well. Okay.
You've played different codes as well. You're currently in a different code too.
Yeah.
That's a whole different
staying true to your rugby union roots.
Yeah, there's a podcast right there. We could do a podcast and put all your guys' different jerseys in the background, I think. But Rog, what about yourself, mate? What have you been up to since we last saw you? Back in March?
I think back in March, I think the club season was just kicking off in Auckland, or just at the back end of the pre-season in March. So, just been rolling around in the reserve grade for the Prem Development team for Waitemata. So, and ending this week with a grand final for the reserves. It's going to be hosted at Waitemata, courtesy of Auckland Rugby, due to Eden Park being out of commission due to the current, soon to start Women's FIFA World Cup. Hence the All Blacks playing at Mount Smart Go Media Stadium on the weekend.
Nice. We will touch on that club rugby seen a little bit later on in the podcast. But what I wanted to start with was a few shout-outs. So I had a quick listen to our pre-season predictions at the start of 2023, and we had some mixed results so far.
Came close, eh?
Yeah.
I came close, eh?
Very close, very close. I'll say that I was way off, and I should probably stop you on this podcast. None of my predictions came to pass, but I will give credit where credit's due. Rog, you were very, very close, and Joey as well, very close with your prediction. So Rog, you obviously picked the Chiefs to have a big season, and to be fair, they were probably the best team all year, and just fell at the last hurdle. So Sully's another guy who's a regular on the podcast.
I don't even think it was a hurdle. I think it was a forward pass. But it was, hurdle, so to speak.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the Hurricanes game?
Oh, the Chiefs, wow.
Oh, sorry.
Silly. It's
old news now.
your
It's old
brother, Glenn O'Keefe or Ben O'Keefe.
Yeah.
But no, it was a good final, but...
I'll give a shout out to Sully as well. He also mentioned the Chiefs would be right up there. Another thing which we tried to predict was the women's one. Matatu, they won Super Rugby All Picky. So no luck for anyone. No one picked that one.
They pipped Chiefs Manawa at the final. But,
yeah, I think you jumped on the Chiefs for a double there, Rog. So you back-to-back runners up. That's not too bad.
What was your prediction, Stace? What can you just remind us?
It's yesterday's news.
Remind us.
No, I picked the Blues. I picked the Blues double, and that was a bit of a disaster, to be honest. The semi-final. We won't talk too much into it because it's old news. But
it was a pretty terrible semi-final, though. Hey,
what's disgraceful?
A lot of potential, but I think at least you've got Super Aotearoa. Carry on.
Yeah, we do, and that trophy will always be with us.
It's never to be played for again.
Yeah, but Joey, I'll single you out, mate. We picked a player to watch out for. You picked Mark Talia as a player that will have a big season in Super Rugby, and to be honest, he was close to the best player of the tournament. So that was right up there as one of our best predictions. So thought I'd give you a shout out there as well. So
thank you.
Well done.
Thank you. And before I start talking this time around, I'd just like to give a big shout out to our fellow podcaster and panelist, Sale Kirasoma, who is preparing currently for a grand final this weekend at Waitemata Rugby Club. So, all the best to you, Sale. Also like to make a quick shout out to our regular listeners. There's 3 of them that I know of. One is King Carlos Spencer, the other is Adam Thompson, and the other one's Case Muse. So shout out to you guys.
Nice. I wonder who the 4th guy is who listens to our podcast, because we don't get that many listeners.
Oh, that's probably Ronnie Cribb.
Yeah. Nice. Good shout outs there. Yep, carry on.
The Mark Talia prediction was quite an easy one to make because he was coming off an injury-free season last season, and he was on the fringes of the All Blacks. He hadn't quite cemented his place, but I think he's probably there now, cementing a spot and possibly a shoo-in for Rugby World Cup selection. I would go as far as saying that he may even star in a lot of the matches in the Rugby World Cup. So that's probably a prediction there as well.
Nice.
I'm glad that he has not made a liar out of me. And my prediction also came from a lot of conversations I had with players in and around that rugby scene at the Blues who just spoke very highly of his work ethic and also the fact that he has one of the strongest cores of all the rugby players there. So I think that has helped him massively, especially when breaking tackles, as we've come to enjoy.
Nice. Yeah, I always put you guys on the spot and try and give me some predictions, and you guys aren't afraid to make some big calls. So it's always nice when you make a big call. Mark Talia, watch out for him. He's going to carve up in Super Rugby, and then he actually has one of the best individual seasons we've seen from outside back. So well done there, Joey. But what I wanted to look at first and foremost, while we get into it, is the international games. That's going to be our focus to start off with. And I thought we'll start with the the All Blacks obviously playing South Africa over the weekend, and the All Blacks taking it out 35-20. So just get your guys' initial thoughts. Rog, mate, what did you make of the game? I'll give you the first word on that one.
I think even before the game kicked off and they ran up a few stats that I knew that the All Blacks had been undefeated in Auckland for a long time, but then its record with South Africa alone, the South Africans have only won 10 times against the ABs at home, and the ABs have won 32, but they've drawn 3. And then in Auckland alone, South Africa had only an 18% win rate in Auckland. So I don't know whether that includes Eden Park, because I know, no one's beaten the All Blacks at Eden Park for a long time, since the 80s, I think it is.
94, they lost to France.
94, sorry. So since the 90s. But yeah, Eden Park's been one of those places where they haven't been defeated. So now Mount Smart, since they played in Mount Smart, does that, I guess they have to make that record an Auckland record, not necessarily just an Eden Park record.
Well, I don't want Foster to play at Eden Park because he'll probably stuff up that record. So I'm glad they played it.
I guess yeah, Foster will never be coach of the All Blacks again at Eden Park because this is it for him. But I think their first 15 minutes was integral, and we saw the makings of what the game was all going to be all about, because it was quite a fast-paced 15 minutes. And I did a bit of a stat count in that. Frizzell had four runs in that first 15 minutes. Will Jordan had 3. Maunga made a telling tackle on the number 8, Weiss, and so he's a big boy, and he made a really, I think they pronounce it Weiss. And Talia had a really big run, only to be knocked back by It's a bit, but he had 3 further runs after that, and then Sam Cane, Captain Fantastic, had 2 big runs. And this all happened within that first 15 minutes. But then Beauden Barrett went wide to Will Jordan. That's when he skipped past a couple of boys. But then there were 2 quick runs that he made as well. And it was with the quick release that Will Jordan did to then scamper in. And then he came back inside, beat 3 would-be defenders that were coming towards where he got tackled initially. But because of his quick nous, released the ball, got up again and ran back inwards, and that's when he was able to offload to the ever-present Aaron Smith to score that try. And that was the first 15 minutes. And so that was the first 5 minutes. But that was the pace within that 5 minutes. And Frizzell, obviously, we know he was running up the middle and breaking the tackles, but for 15 minutes into that game, we knew the pace that the All Blacks were wanting to play at. I don't think they sustained it further into the game, but they started off with a real hiss and a roar, as they say, and I think that set the tone, the type of rugby that the All Blacks were trying to play, and regardless of what the game plan that the South Africans had of having 12 rested players from the previous week against Australia already in Auckland, I think they took them by surprise, gave them a bit of a reality check, and Frizzell had sort of moments of Jono Lomu-esque type performance.
Well, nice, because before that he had moments of...
Well, that's the thing. Frizzell's always been an interesting selection for mine. I mean, I'm not... I don't understand the ins and outs of flanker or loose forward play for by any stretch of the imagination, but he hasn't really been the one that, because there's been a few people since Jerome Kainel that they've had in at 6. Papali'i's been tested there. Ari Savia, Akira Ioane. So I think this was probably, and then they have Vaifefita before that too. So I think this is where he stamped his mark. He wants to be included. He comes off a unfortunate season with the Highlanders, where they were the cellar dwellers of the New Zealand Conference anyway, or of the New Zealand sort of table. But I think he needed to sort of make a mark for his inclusion in this upcoming Rugby World Cup, let alone for the current Rugby Championship. But if he made some noise, he definitely did that night.
Yeah. It was interesting because we're going back a bit now, but when Foster picked his first All Black side for the year, and he mentioned on the breakdown that one person he picked his team after the semi-finals, Super Rugby semi-finals, and before the final, and he mentioned that one player played his way out of the World Cup in that semi-final, and then one person played their way into the World Cup on that semi-final, and the person who he said played his way, or he didn't say, but they figured it out, the person who played his way out of the All Blacks during that semi-final was Akira Ioane. So he thought that he was poor against the Crusaders, and that's how Samipeni Finau got in. It was a last-minute call. So they've been searching for a someone. So I'm glad that Frizzell's made that opportunity, because you said it was Jonah Lomu-esque over the weekend, but before that, it was Ruben Thorne-esque. Before that, he is fucking missing in action.
But that's an interesting point that you make about the Chiefs loose forward coming in and Akira, because Akira has had so much potential over the last 3-4 years to even to become somewhat, is he not would you say an incumbent number 6 at the moment, or
well, he was the sixth last year.
Yeah, so played his way out. I reckon he's been playing okay for the Blues. He's still damaging runner, but I think lapses of discipline in that semi-final. I think it was showing some of the frailties of his discipline in his game before he became an All Black, and probably the reasons why he didn't become an All Black earlier as well, creeping back into his game. But I think it's something that Akira knows he probably needs to work on, and I think he's still got test match football in him, I believe, in the future. If not this year, unfortunate, but...
Well, Frizzell's signed for a Japanese club for next year. So after the World Cup, he's done, and then you're right, the 6th jersey will be open again, and it could be Akira's to take, because he signed for New Zealand Rugby at least. So yeah, the ball's in his court, but you're right, they haven't had a 6. Someone owned that jersey since Kaino left. So yeah, good thoughts there, Rog. Joey, mate, what did you make of that game over the weekend?
I thought it was quite enjoyable, especially given the naysaying leading into the match by the media and also by people that I was talking to in the rugby circles, who were kind of writing the All Blacks off. Even chat. And in our group chat, and even before the Argentina game, right? And then the All Blacks come and do a 41-12 scoreline on Argentina leading into this match. Go ahead, Rog.
But based on what? What is it that people are still... Is there a hangover from last season? Or was it is it more because of Foster still being in charge? Because they say Foster gets the hammering when we lose. Foster gets the hammering when apparently we don't have a game plan. Yet we get a good result like that, and they say, "Oh, it must be the assistants. It's Joe Smith, it's Jason Ryan."
That's my
but
point.
when is Foster going to get the credit for? If Foster wins the World Cup, it's not Foster.
It's not to me.
It's not. But why?
He's been coach for 4 years, and now finally we're seeing the All Blacks turn a corner. What's changed in recent times? In the last 9 months ish.
But do you give
Joe Schmidt
Foster,
and Jason Ryan have come on board, and now they're
the
embedding
World
their
Cups
ideas.
Do you give Foster any
we're seeing
credit
the fruits of that.
for the World Cup that was won in 2015? He was an assistant. No, we give the credit to a lot of it to the coach, right?
Well, it's not that I don't give him the credit. Well, maybe I don't give him the credit, but I give him a lot of the blame. He's been the coach for 4 years. He's been the coach for 4 years, and we've seen 3 years of garbage. So I give him the blame for their 3 years of garbage. We've seen them turn it around recently, but I think Joe Schmidt and Jason Ryan deserve a lot of the credit. They came on board 9 months ago, and their ideas are starting to bear fruit.
I wouldn't discard that at all, but I think it's a collective effort from all the coaches, as well as similar to, Graham Henry would be the last person to say all the credit was his when he won the World Cup. Steve Hansen would be the same. They wouldn't necessarily. They'd say it's the personnel that they have with them. So of course, Schmidt and Ryan have a part to play. Scott McLeod even, but you got the head coach, and he doesn't seem to have the favour of the nation, which I understand because of his It's been bandied on and on and on about his record with his Super Rugby record as a coach, his NPC record as a coach, and then what
His
gives
whole
him.
coaching record as a head coach.
I totally understand, but his win ratio as a head coach of the All Blacks is slowly climbing now. It's going to be in the 70s, and mark my words, by the end of the Rugby World Cup, it'll be well into the 70s, and he will not. If it's going to be based on his win ratio as the worst coach of the All Blacks ever, I don't think that's going to be the case, because his win rate ratio, and then with a World Cup win to boot, can you still put him down as the worst All Blacks coach in the world? That's what he's got to look forward to try and get a World Cup now, and then flip the bird at the rest of the New Zealand. Will you then support him? Is that...
No, I think if a coach has 4 years in charge, and his 3 years, first 3 years are Gaia, and then in the fourth year he turns it around, you try to think to yourself, what changed in that fourth year? Did he suddenly become a great coach after 3 years of garbage, or did something change? And what changed was he got 2 great assistants. So I give the assistants more credit, because they weren't part of the 3 years of garbage. They were part of the 1 year turnaround.
Don't you give that credit to the head coach as well, because the assistants have been coming?
I give him the blame for the first 3 years.
But he'll be part of the selection process of getting these assistants in as well. So was it the assistants' fault from prior then? Do they, the ones that got ousted, do they then fork the blame?
Well, what happened was they wanted to get rid of them before. I think they wanted to get rid of them before. So they did a review after years of garbage, and they thought that Foster was okay, but the assistants were garbage. But Foster didn't want to get rid of those assistants, so he kept them on for longer than they should have been in the job. And that's poor management on his part.
What we're failing to see, though, is that international opposition, has improved. Can you say that? Are you saying it's because of a woeful All Blacks that we lost to Ireland, that we lost the first series to Ireland? Is it a woeful All Blacks team because, or woeful coaching because we didn't win a British and Irish Lions series in 2017, was it?
So, I think that it's a continuation of bad ideas. So he was an assistant coach to Hansen, and Hansen, towards the end of his tenure, he struggled to beat the rush defence. And we're seeing that play out again. He's not bringing anything new. He's recycling old ideas that worked in the late 2010s.
So when we had this conversation this time or at the end of next year, when we have a review of what Razor's done and he has a few losses to his name, will you then be able to speak analytically about what Razor has brought to, because apparently he's going to be the saviour, he's going to be remarkable, invincible, and going to have a win, no losses in his tenure to come. No. Because he's
more than one thing can be true. So the opposition and the other teams around the world can improve, that's true, but the All Blacks can also regress, that's also true. And that's the part that Foster's responsible for. Anyway, this is Joey's time to have a say. Rod, stop sidetracking these conversations.
Sorry, Joey. Carry on, Joey.
Carry on.
Oh, the match on the weekend against the Boca was nice. It's always nice to be on the right end. Well, we call it the right end of the results board, and to get that W against a formidable team like our old foe, the South Africans, is always nice. I put it down to a few things. The conditions were the exact same conditions in my eyes, bar the stadium, as the Albany 57-0 drubbing that the South Africans got when what's her name, Nehemilna Scudder was still playing.
Yep.
I was there at the stadium that night, and it was nice to watch and be a part of on that cold, crispy night. I think, given the fact that this is World Cup year, this is a nice way for the All Blacks to place one hand on the championship trophy, right? I think it's also good for the coaches to see who in this particular squad they will have their eye on to take on World Cup honours. And I think from the squad we can already see some standouts in terms of, I want to see that guy there and that guy there and that guy there. It's funny you guys bring up Akira Ioane and his poor showing in the semi-finals against the Crusaders. Just on that, I think the Blues have been consistent, so you've got to hand that to them, in that they are consistently bringing their worst game to the finals against the Crusaders consistently.
Yes.
So they played very well into the lead up to that particular game, and it was really sad as a Blues fan to see that they just faltered once again against the Crusaders. And full credit to the Crusaders.
What's apparent there, Joey, is that they've got this tag of being massive movers and shakers, right? They've improved greatly and they've had great form throughout the season. Last season, especially, when they get to the grand final, we're going to the ship. And it's almost like, was that a finalist team that just played there? They got a massive drubbing by the Crusaders, or the Crusaders just that good, and then come again this season where they've had a couple of losses, but they still had awesome form. When they did win, they won well and convincingly. They were in the grind for some of the closer wins, but then they got to the semi-final, another drubbing, as if they weren't in the top four. It didn't seem like they were in there. And I feel sorry for Akira because, he gets a bit of a scapegoat tag there where he didn't play well. But I think right across the board, even Mark Telea, he couldn't, ball wouldn't stick. He couldn't quite make the breaks that he was making in the regular season leading up to that. So I think it was just, they switch, and the Crusaders just go up another level. Doesn't matter where they fall in that top 8. They just need to make the finals, and they make their run from there. And then they're just a harder team to beat. They're just a bit more clinical, more sharp than most other teams. And at the end of the day, regardless of forward passes or whatever caused the referee missed, they took advantage of the opportunities.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And look, as a RTS fan, I was kind of glad that he wasn't a part of that nonsense, that nonsense semi-final is what I call it. And yes, to answer in your questions, I am one of those fickle Blues fans that are with them with the wins and against them in the losses.
Joey,
yeah. I do think
you and I both know of all the teams that you played, it's not necessarily about the game day, the game sheet day team, or the ones that make the 23. It's about everyone that's been in that journey throughout the season. So regardless of whether RT has played in that semi-final, he's part of that journey. He's part of the 2023 season.
Yeah, especially if they had won it.
Yep. Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to say just on that, I do wonder about, like you talked about it, Roger. It's probably in the last 2 years, their 2 worst performances have been against the Crusaders in the playoffs. So I wonder if a lot of that is psychological.
Massively, because you think
absolutely.
You look at the Crusaders' record at finals. They've never lost at home in any playoff matches. So whenever they get the home advantage, man, the history's on their side. The record says that. And then any playoffs, they're just hard to beat at home or even in New Zealand. Yeah. When they lost that one game against the Reds, and I think that was over there. That was in Queensland, in Brisbane.
Yeah, so, I know that there's a lot deeper to that psychology between the Blues and the Crusaders. So we talk about it being a rivalry, but is it an actual rivalry? There's this great article on our website just for any of our listeners who want to dig a bit deeper into it, written by our editor Cameron about it. The potential psychological damage that the Blues are suffering at the hands of the Crusaders. If anyone wants to have a look, check it out on our website.
Stace, can we liken that rivalry, to Wales and the All Blacks? Because they still say, they talk about how Wales is one of their foes. Is it traditional foes, really? And they haven't beaten the All Blacks since 1953. So are we, they talk about the dynasty that the Blues once had and the Auckland Rugby once had, but then the Crusaders, 8 championships. Can we actually say that the Blues are on par with the Crusaders?
That's a really good analogy, but I think if you talk to a Welsh person, they will say that's a great rivalry. But an All Black person will say, no, that's not. So the Blues will always say that's a great rivalry. But I wonder what a Crusaders fan thinks. They're like,
do you mean a Welsh great? in terms of the locking
No,
stocks?
I reckon a Welsh fan of the Welsh great. Hey, Stace.
Yes. Oh, I'm one of many, the multitude of fans of the great Alan days. Anyway, that's a topic for another day, boys. But just on this, good thoughts, boys, there on the All Blacks, South Africa. I wanted to just looking at a bit deeper at the All Black squad. So they've picked 5 debutants in the squad: Tamaiti Williams, Sami Penifino, who we touched on briefly, Cam Roygard, Dallas McLeod, and Emoni Narawa. So sometimes a guy will get picked sort of out of nowhere and he'll kick on and become sort of someone special for the black jersey. I'm just asking you, Joey, mate, do you think any of these guys will kick on and we might think, shucks, that was the making of someone who could potentially be a gun for the All Blacks?
You know what? I haven't seen anyone yet that stands out to me like that, as a potential gun for the future or to one to look out for. The only one that I can think of that I would like to see as a gun in the future is Tamaiti Williams. Like, Tamaiti is a huge unit of a man. I remember seeing him in the first, in the Blues finals loss last year in 2022.
Drubbing.
In the final when I was sitting in the rain, all the way from Hamilton, City of the Future, to watch them lose the way they did. But I'm still a Blues fan. I'm not jumping ship, but at the same time, it's Tamaiti Williams is my one to look out for, just because I'm biased as a front rower, and I love to see big units at in the front row playing. I wish he would wear some headgear though.
Look after his ears.
Just because I don't want him to end up like the poor bloke, my other propping hero, Carl Heyman, the way, he's now taken a turn for the worse in terms of his rugby career, turning to now suffering from dementia. But yeah, going back to what you guys mentioned earlier about the last All Blacks loss at Eden Park being the 1994 test against France. Could we fact check something, please? If anyone's there to do any fact checking. And that is, I want to see, is that the test where it was Jonah's first test and he got shown up by Intermuck?
Intermuck. Yeah, he gave him a lesson,
turned him inside out?
Yep.
Okay, what was that one? Okay, that was the last time we lost at Eden Park. The late, great Jonah Longwell, rest in peace. My hero, my hometown hero from Favona, Mangere.
So I thought Jonah showed great mental fortitude, because he was the next great thing. He gets chucked into the deep end for this test. He had grown up playing number 8, and then he gets chucked in on the wing. He gets a lesson from Intermac, and then people think, just bombarding him from pillar to post, and he's like jettisoned out of the All Blacks. Comes back next year, 95, basically the player of the tournament and that World Cup. So special shout out
for global superstar.
That's right. So, Rod, you were going to jump in there?
I can't remember what I was going to say.
Oh.
First guy with a McDonald's deal and a shoe deal.
Yeah.
No, that's right.
Nice.
I think I was just going to say, Tamaiti Williams, I'm really excited about him and how young he is, because basically the last sort of young prop, Fletcher Neal was quite young as well, but then it's reminiscent of Owen Franks. Owen Franks came in at that age as well, 20, 21, and he went on I think he's our most capped All Black prop now, and then Tony Woodcock's not too far behind.
How many caps was that?
Oh, maybe I think he's around the 108 mark, 110.
Ooh.
I think
that's still not near Jason Leonard's, is it?
Oh, did he get a try? Did he get a try in the end?
It's a good question.
He had the record for a while.
He got one try.
No, he got one. He got one try. Yeah, that's right. But I think him and Tony Woodcock, but he'll definitely be our most capped tight head prop, given that Tony is loose head prop. But the other thing is about Tamaiti Williams, because what I was observing with the South African pack on the weekend is that, they talked about how big these guys are and how big their forwards are, but come the weight, and then was it the 1 kilo There's 1 kilo between the packs. And I felt that in that first half, the All Blacks were on parity with the South. They have a different setup. If you watch back the replay on that, you'll see how the number 8s pack. Our number 8s, traditionally, they pack with their arms, their elbows behind their back. Our number 8. If you look at the way that the South African number 8s pack, they're fully extended. They're as long. Their legs are way back as opposed to bent knee. And so that's how they use their size as well as technique. So there's good technical aspects in that scrummage. And then I felt that once Tamati Williams was injected into the 60th minute, he was able to hold his own, because I think Lomax was starting to tire and the Springboks were starting to get dominance. There was a few scrums where they just pushed the All Blacks back a couple of metres. And so that's when they started to inject the Nepololala and our new debutant, Tamati Williams. So I think he's got a big future. But the reason why I think I was going to interject before, is that you talk about how Frizzell's off to Japan next year. It's really hard. The question is, who do you see as the future of the All Black rugby? With the money overseas being so massive an appeal, it's hard to see how many of these guys are going to actually stick around for more than 2-3 seasons. Because is the All Black jersey appealing enough these days? I believe it is. But then, Razor's already entertaining next year when he comes into tenure that he's considering opening it up to All Blacks based overseas. Will that change the landscape of Super Rugby? I mean, you got Fitzpatrick as well coming in saying that top 14, top 14 is even better than Super Rugby in its current state. So Northern Hemisphere has got the upper hand, and that's where we're seeing the French game, the English game to an extent, the Irish game really excel. And is that to the detriment? Can we say players are going to stick around? Will Anarawa stick around once he's got a few tests behind him? But you've still got the competition of a Caleb Clark, Will Jordan, Mark Talia. Mark Talia, he could definitely be around for a bit longer, but once he's in the late 20s, closer to 30, is when you're considered an older outside back. So do you capitalise and go overseas to get some coin? Forwards can do it differently, because forwards can mature at different at a later age, so they can afford to go at a later age and well into their 30s over in Europe, Japan, and wherever else to capitalise on their All Black status. Backs are slightly different, because once you hit that 30 or close in on it, you're considered over the hill. So, small window.
It'll be interesting how they manage that, because the only thing that keeps people in New Zealand is the All Black jersey. It's not the money. You will make more money overseas. It doesn't matter how good you are, how shitty you are.
And that's why it's encouraging to hear Penera. Is he past his best? But we don't know. But he's going to stick around, because it'll be him and Roigard fighting out for that Canes jersey. But then obviously he's got an incentive to wanting to add to his caps, his All Black caps, TJ Perenara. And who knows, will he be around for another 4 years in time for another World Cup? We don't know. But, he obviously knows Aaron Smith is moving on. So he's going to fight for, one of those, either the second spot or the third spot in the ABs as a halfback. So adding to his All Black cap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting argument, mate. Joey, mate, you got any thoughts on that? If they should open it up, or if they will open it up to overseas guys, maybe do like a some conditions, like I think Australia's got something. But what are your thoughts on that?
For New Zealand, I don't think they should open it up, just because we've got enough talent here to sustain, the longevity of the legacy of the All Blacks jersey being forever strong. And, we've got great development here. But at the same time, I think for other countries, I can see the viability in it, and choosing overseas players who are based abroad, or who may be in France or England playing on a contract over there. And I can also see the feasibility of having those players available when maybe a northern tour of those places are done. You know, because
Injury cover,
injuries can happen, and I know I've seen it happen time and time again with the sevens form, where New Zealand sevens teams have gone over to that part of the world and played sevens tournaments, and they've called upon guys who've been on contract over there. Like, for instance, when they did the same thing with Mana Ashford, they brought him in. He did an amazing step and won the bloody game for them. It was the
I think
final.
I remember that. Yeah, I think I watched that. Yeah.
He did a step from a penalty, and he won the game. And there was kind of
There was
like
a jumping one too.
there was a jumping one. There was a jumping one that didn't wreck his knee.
Well, I guess the thing is with that though, with they do open it up and start choosing players from overseas, I can understand the pros with it, but the cons would be your young aspiring All Black in New Zealand looking at that and saying, well, what's the point of sticking around if they're going to continue to choose players? Because you think your opportunity might come now that some of the more seasoned All Blacks move on and go overseas, and then, okay, it opens a door. There's Frizzell going, this opens a door. Moanga's going, it opens a door for the next one to step in, or the understudy to stake their claim. But then now, if they're going to... So will there be restrictions? Because if players go overseas and still get selected, the money's going to lure... They're eating their cake, having their cake and eating it too, Get the big contract overseas, but I can still play for the All Blacks. Or do I sacrifice the potential earning overseas, but stay for the appeal of the jersey? And so there's what's the guarantees for a younger person sticking around then? Why stick around when I'm not going to get selected because people are going to still get selected from overseas? Well, that's always been tradition, but who knows? We'll never experience it unless we do experience it. Australia have tried it. Gateau was a well-known story about him playing abroad, and they brought him in for his last World Cup. And they're experiencing it now with Will Skelton and even guys just being selected whilst playing abroad. Has it been the most successful formula for them to date? I don't think so. But,
Yeah. I'd hate to see what Super Rugby looks like, because this is probably the most boringest year of Super Rugby that I can think of this year.
Are you saying that because your team was mediocre? Or?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that because this was the least amount of games I've ever watched. I've normally watched a lot of games, but I only watched all the Blues games, and I found myself watching more NRL than Super Rugby, which is part of the reason why we haven't kept the podcast going. I couldn't comment on a lot of the games, and I just felt that there was too many blowouts, there was too many predictable scores and predictable wins, and if you exacerbate that by taking all the top players out because they're taking the money and knowing they're going to get in the All Blacks, like what would Super Rugby look like? But I think we're reaching a critical juncture because players that went overseas, they wouldn't be good enough to get in the All Blacks anymore. So even if they opened it up, I would struggle to think prior how many guys from overseas we would take as say you're better than the local guys. But I think we're reaching that juncture now because Mo'unga's going to be overseas. I think Barrett's going overseas. Frizzell we talked about. These are guys who would still be potentially the best in their position who are New Zealanders. And that's where we're reaching that juncture.
Opens up. So you go back to Luke McAllister leaving at an early age.
But we will find we had whoever else was next in line was better.
That's true. But then given the option, you'll have a more of an exodus where players will then choose that option of going, because I still have a chance of being selected even if I'm an incumbent now and I'm at the peak of my powers now. So if those rulings were in place, I believe a Charlie Piotr would still get selected from abroad because he was still one of our best outside backs at the time he left.
I'm not convinced. Ooh. Because he didn't get picked in the World Cup squad for as good as he was. And this is sort of an issue
that came about though, Stace. That came about was because he was already signed. That was the controversy. He was already signed to go abroad, and so they didn't bother honouring his. And there was obviously there was more of a backstory to it that at the time it was leaked. But it's different now. You see guys like Whainganuku, he's going abroad, and yet he's still being included in this World Cup squad.
But that comes back to the coach being sacked beforehand. So Foster's already on the way out, so he's not looking about the future of New Zealand rugby. He doesn't care. So he picks Frizzell over Akira. he'll pick Leicester over whoever.
To make a
Whereas
point,
before, if
to
he
flip the bird at New Zealand Rugby Union
not to
so
make
that
a
they
point,
can
but
win
if
it.
he felt that he was still going to be part of New Zealand Rugby, then that's where if it's a close call, they'll pick the guy who's staying loyal to New Zealand, which is where Peter got.
But I think Foster's in an interesting predicament because
he doesn't matter what he does, he's out.
He does it. Yeah, that's right. He's out no matter what. So he's not looking for the future. He's looking for a result that will send him off into the sunset. He's looking for the best team, regardless if they're going off contract at the end of the year, because he wants his final legacy. He wants to at least have a Rugby World Cup win under his coaching stats, despite a poor record as a coach. But if he leaves, you look at Stephen Donald, look at the turnaround that we had of him as a player. You know, a year before he was the villain of a test in Japan or Hong Kong when they lost to Australia. But then he comes back from whitebaiting and now he's a legend in the folklore of All Black history because of his feats at a World Cup final.
Right. Yeah, interesting thoughts. It'll be interesting what they do because this is, like I said before, I think we've reached that critical juncture where there's going to be New Zealanders overseas who are better than the New Zealanders who stay. And we haven't got to that point before, I don't think. So you talk about Luke McAllister, when he left in 2007 after 2007 World Cup, Martin Onu became the All Black starting second five 2008. That's fine. Go McAllister. This guy's just.
Oh no, I'm not trying to compare. The player ability or the caliber of players. What I'm trying to say is that players will have a viable option to choose, regardless of whether they're an incumbent or whether they're a fringe player, to go overseas. So we lose all of this talent abroad, and then we either have to make do with selecting what we have left or choose from those that are. If that becomes the relaxing of those regulations, I believe we'll see more players leave because now they can still have their eligibility on their side, whether they play here or there.
Right. My point is that I think we're starting to reach that point. So this is where Australia got to before, where they had better players playing overseas than they had locally, and that's where they started to relax the rules a bit. South Africa got to that same point as well, where Andre Pollard and all those other guys, Cheslin Kolbe, playing overseas, and the overseas guys were better than the locals. And I think we're reaching that point because Mo'unga will be better than, I don't know who's left. Mo'unga Barrett is gone. That's guns, first fives. Yeah, if Mackenzie's, God forbid something happens, I'm assuming he's staying. The cupboard's pretty bare after that.
As a fan of rugby, regardless of my affiliation and allegiance to All Blacks, I really enjoyed, firstly, Will Jordan. It was like he was never injured. It was like he was never away from the game. And it's almost seemed like he got better than he was before. The way he slipped that gap, the way he slipped that fended that guy off, and then handed the ball over to Aaron Smith for his try. It was really nice to see. That, and then you have Cheslin Kolbe. It was nice to see him back. As a fan of rugby, he reminds me of Mather from Jonah Normal Rugby Game, if any of you have ever played that EA Sports game.
Yep.
Big fan of Cheslin Kolbe. So, yeah, it was nice to see guys like him and Will Jordan back. And, in the first half, it was all Blacks. Second half, unfortunately, it was all South Africa with their 3 tries. Quagga Smith, Cheslin Kolbe, and who was the last guy? Marks, the hooker.
When he came off
the team try. Yeah. And so much for the bomb squad. I don't know if you guys knew about that one. The bomb squad that they were talking about, the 6 bench guys who they were relying on to bring all on at one point in the game, and which they did, but they seemed not enough to get the job done. That's it from me.
Yep, nice. Nice thoughts there, boys. We'll move forward.
I think with the South Africa is a case in point because they've been successful because they've had open where they could go play overseas because the money was so much better to otherwise they'd be lost to. You look at that 07 team, they had a lot of players that were playing abroad. South Africa were littered in the French competition, and they were still being selected. Juan Smith, who was the John Smith? John Smith was still playing.
The hooker, John
hooker
Smith, yep.
come lock. So these guys were playing abroad. Even Victor Matfield ended up going overseas and still being able to be selected for South Africa. So had they not done that, and having those relaxed eligibility, so they've gone on to win 2 World Cups since then, in the 07 and then 2019. So is it it hasn't quite worked out for Australia. The dynamic is different because, I guess similarly to, they don't have a domestic competition. So other than the Super Rugby, they have to go and play in professional environments all year round. So that's why they do that. And maybe that's why they've opened it up for Australians to be selected from overseas. But South Africa have been doing it as well. And they're the most successful, or one of the most successful nations to have won World Cups. So it's probably, like you say, Stace, a lot closer than we probably want it to be, to open those borders? Or are we still going to hope that the black jersey is appealing enough for players to stay in the domestic competition?
Yeah,
I guess
I think with South Africa players playing overseas, like playing in parts of Europe and London and parts of the UK, it's like real muddy, it's dirty, it's like real, not 10-man rugby, but it's real forward orientated lineouts and set piece, and that style of play playing overseas, that suits South Africa's game anyway. So their players going overseas and immersing themselves in that sort of style suits them well. It doesn't suit Australia as well because they like to play a bit more, throw the ball around and use a bit more skill. New Zealand is not quite as loose as Australia, but they like to play a similar game. So we've seen New Zealanders go overseas and try and come back who haven't been as good, particularly the backs. You talk about Luke McAllister wasn't as good. Heaps of guys have come back, haven't been as good. So I don't know if that will work for New Zealand. They would either have to rethink their philosophy or stick with New Zealand guys, because I don't know that the European game translates well to the way that we want to play. Yeah, that's my final thoughts.
Oh, funnily enough, you mentioned Luke McAllister. He was on a podcast recently. I can't remember which podcast, but he was interviewed recently on a podcast, a rugby one, and he mentioned himself, he admitted that when he came back from his overseas contract, he was rubbish. And he didn't intend.
He could still command a decent salary pack to continue to play Super. Yeah,
for sure. And he said he was past his peak when he came back. At the same time, people were saying that he was trying to win an All Black spot again, but he wasn't. In his mind, he didn't want to do the professional rugby thing anymore. He was done when he came home, but they still gave him a professional spot. But anyway, that was that. I've got a suggestion. Would it be a ridiculous idea if we had another, I guess, fun topic to add to this podcast or future podcasts? I was just thinking as you guys were talking, I don't know what you would like to call it, but the idea is we all go around and pick one player who we saw on the international scene play for a nation that wasn't their home nation, but if they did play for their home nation, what it could have been like. Like for me, I'll start us off. Peter de Villiers, tight head prop for France, what he would have been like if he played for South Africa. The same could be done for guys like Wingy Atonil, who's the current prop at France, right? So if he played for Samoa, how different his life could have been, or his rugby playing could have been.
Bandiaki.
If
he was, instead of playing for Ireland, he had 3 years prior to that where he would have automatically qualified for the Manu. But then what we know is that how many players stick around to play for the Manu between World Cups or even beyond, for as long as... There's not many because then, when they have those clauses in their club contracts that allow them to prop up the French competition while the national players, international players are gone away to play at global meets like the World Cup. It's in their clauses. That's why, players end up playing for club over country or not having the ability to play for country.
So who would your pick be then? Mine's Peter de Villiers. Who would your pick be?
Andrew Mertens.
Oh, yes. Nice. I like that. Didn't think of that one.
How would he have been?
In
South Africa.
South Africa.
Yeah. Would he have become a Bok?
Yes.
Over Stransky.
Well, that's the thing. You got Stransky, you got Yanni de Beer, around that time.
Henry Honeyball.
Henry Honeyball in the 90s. So
Honeyball
he would have been.
Smashed him.
So, Honeyball, I loved the way Honeyball played.
His tackling was unreal.
And he was quite a tall first five. He was really tall. But then you've got the likes of Bowden Barrett, Geordie Barrett, who are of the taller.
Butch James later on.
Butch James. Yeah, so...
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that would be my... Andrew Mertens would be an interesting...
Stace.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was thinking of someone like... Because obviously the All Blacks are my team, but not my second team. First equal is probably the Manu. And I'm thinking of how many guys we could have had. So I think of someone like Kaino, who I rate as probably one of the best sixers I've seen. But he was born in Samoa.
American.
I would have just
American Samoa.
American Samoa, right. But that's still close enough. I would have loved to have seen
him played league first.
Anyone just in their prime playing for the Manu. Because we, like Rog mentioned, we either get them when they've tried for the All Blacks and it hasn't worked out, or guys who aren't going to make it. So there's a lot of talent that we could have had, and I think of guys like that who what would have happened if we could have got hold of some of these guys. Well, yeah, that's probably someone who I would have thinking of. Also, sort of like not really semi-related, but not really, like a sliding doors moment if someone had stayed. So I think of someone like, you remember that guy Regan King?
Yeah.
Of course.
He was one
test.
He went to Wales,
and then he left.
Cardiff.
And then that was the end of his international career. But I think, shucks, he could have been someone. I reckon if he could have just stuck it out a bit longer.
But I mean, in saying
he could have been a gunman.
That's an interesting line you just used. He could have been someone. But in the Northern Hemisphere, he was someone. He forged an amazing career in the Northern Hemisphere. I think in Wales. But he just didn't. Obviously, we didn't have as much access to his Northern Hemisphere career. But as far as I'm aware, he did play a good number of years abroad. But
he got picked in the World 15 by the IRB one year, and he was the only guy who got picked who wasn't playing any internationals. Just for an outstanding year of club rugby, he got picked, and he was the only one non-international who got picked. But I reckon he could have been a gun centre for the All Blacks if he just hung around a bit longer. So it's sort of not really what you're talking about, but just sort of a sliding doors moment that I think about.
Yeah, there'd be so many. There's, hey Joey, there'd be so many guys that you could probably, like you look at Toby Faletau, plays for Wales, but he went over as a young boy and Wales is all he knows. So
he's got a Welsh accent.
Yeah. Well, and then you got Manu Tuilangi, I suppose, but.
You've also got players like the late, great Jonah Lommel.
Yeah, Jonah. There's so many that, All Blacks players that you could afford that too. Yep. Even in the most recent times, like Joe Rokotoko.
Yeah.
Yep.
Seeing
nice.
comfortable, but
nice thoughts there, boys. Yeah, that's interesting. That would be a whole podcast in itself. There, so that we might have to bring that up again, Joyce. So good thoughts there.